My family had owned that stretch of lakefront for longer than I had been alive. The cabin, the shoreline, and every dock had been passed down through generations. When the property finally became mine, I thought I knew every inch of it. Then the HOA moved in next door and decided my land was part of their future. At first, I didn't object to the new neighborhood being built nearby. People had the right to develop land they legally owned. But as the project grew, the construction pushed farther and farther toward my shoreline. And one day, I realized they had crossed more than just a fence line. The first sign came when strangers started using my dock. They said someone from the HOA told them lake access was included with their homes. I explained that the dock was private and belonged to my family property, but they looked at me like I was the one trespassing. Vanessa came down to the dock herself the next morning. She said the HOA needed access to the lake for all 52 homes. I asked her to show me where my family had ever agreed to that. She had no answer, only a demand that I cooperate. That night, I went through every property record my family had saved. The deed clearly described the shoreline, the access points, and the private docks. There was no shared easement and no HOA right to use them. The more I read, the clearer it became Vanessa had demanded something she didn't own. I hired an independent surveyor to settle the question once and for all. He checked the original markers against county coordinates and recorded maps. By the end of the inspection, there was no confusion left. The docks, shoreline, and disputed access area were entirely on my property. I gave the HOA the survey and asked them to stop directing residents onto my docks. Vanessa barely looked at the paperwork before pushing it aside. She said the neighborhood had been promised lake access and expected me to cooperate. That's when I realized a simple conversation wasn't going to solve this. Even after receiving the survey, the HOA kept telling residents to use the docks. More people began showing up every weekend. I didn't confront the families because they had been given the wrong information. Instead, I started documenting exactly who was directing them onto my land. My attorney reviewed every document and every photograph I collected. He told me the HOA had no automatic right to enter private property simply because residents wanted access. We sent a formal notice explaining the legal boundaries and access restrictions. After that, the HOA could no longer claim they didn't know. The final notice gave the HOA one clear choice: stop directing residents onto my private docks or face legal action over continued unauthorized access. Vanessa looked furious when she received it, but what happened next was even more unbelievable. The morning after the final notice, the HOA came straight to my lakefront. Vanessa brought board members and residents, convinced she could pressure me into reopening the docks. I stayed calm and reminded them that the legal boundaries had already been explained. But Vanessa had come looking for an argument, not an answer. I opened my folder and showed them the original deed again. The shoreline, the docks, and the access road were all clearly described in the property records. I told Vanessa she was welcome to challenge the documents through the proper legal process. But she couldn't simply take lake access because the HOA wanted it. Vanessa said the HOA would find a way to get access, one way or another. That was the moment I stopped discussing the matter with her. I had given the HOA the survey, the deed, and formal legal notice. Anything after that would be their decision and their responsibility. My attorney took the evidence to court and requested protection for the private access points. The property records, survey, and repeated notices were all part of the case. Once the legal order was issued, the boundaries became impossible to ignore. Now, there was an official process behind the same warning I had given them from the start. Later that day, deputies arrived to help enforce the legal property restrictions. They reviewed the court documents, the survey, and the marked boundaries. Then they explained the situation clearly to everyone standing there. The HOA could not use private docks without legal permission. The deputies closed the unauthorized access points the HOA had been using. Nobody was forced from their homes, and the residents were directed away from the private shoreline. The only thing being closed was access the HOA never legally owned. Vanessa finally understood that the docks weren't hers to promise. That evening, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. Residents wanted to know why they had been promised lake access that the HOA didn't control. Every question led back to the same documents Vanessa had ignored. The board finally had to confront the mistake before it became even more expensive. The homeowners soon learned that the lake access promise had never been backed by ownership. The marketing brochures had made the lake sound like a shared neighborhood feature. But the original property records told a completely different story. For 52 families, the truth came far too late. Vanessa came back after the board meeting without the crowd behind her. She finally admitted that the HOA should have checked the property records before promising anything. I told her I never wanted a fight with the people living next door. I only wanted my family property respected the same way I respected theirs. In the end, I didn't have to surrender my land just because the HOA demanded it. The deed, the survey, and the legal records had been there all along. My family had protected that shoreline for generations, and I did the same. The HOA promised 52 homes something it never had the right to give.